This is Murder in the Morning with Tony Brueski and Stacy Cole.
Yes, it is indeed. And today we are talking with Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. And I want to get this off the back of the screen.
Yeah, Karen Reed we are not talking about her today. I've had enough of her.
I'm going to put the graphic up in a moment here, but Nightbird is the book. This is Shavaun's new memoir. Shavaun, welcome to the program. Of course, everybody knows Shavaun. She comes on quite a bit and talks about our cases. But yeah, you got the new memoir out, Nightbird, like I said, available wherever books are sold, or your favorite small bookstore. They can get it too. Yeah, there's so much to this. I had a chance to sit down and I did the audiobook, which you did a lovely reading of. Stacy, you just appeared to disappear from our camera. Shavaun, tell me.
I have an audio problem. Keep going. I'll be back in a second.
Okay. Shavaun, I'm going to jump to you and... Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot in this book. I don't even know where to begin. What gave you the idea to tell your story, to get it out there in the way that you are in this book? How did that all come about?
I have been told for years by people who get to know me well. A lot of people know me superficially, but they don't know my background. And I have had an incredibly weird, colorful, strange background. And people, when they find out about it, have said, oh, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And that whole idea just felt overwhelming. But when I moved to Oregon in 2017, I'd written other books and more clinical psychological books. And I was looking for a way to get to know people here because I didn't really have a community. And somebody suggested, oh, there's the Multnomah Arts Center. They've got all kinds of great classes. And the one class I could fit into my schedule was on memoir. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I've never really written memoir before. And so I dived into that, met a bunch of wonderful friends. Even when the class was over, we continued meeting, and I found it was a wonderful way to connect the dots of one's life by looking back at your story and your history and trying to build a coherent narrative. And so I had accumulated, I'm still involved in memoir groups, and accumulated a notebook, like a foot thick of different vignettes and little pieces from childhood and relationships and all of that. And then I didn't intend to turn it into a book. And about a year ago, strangely enough, a publisher who follows me on Facebook said, I really love your dark humor and you know so much and you put out all this cool psychology stuff. Would you ever consider writing a memoir? Because I'd like to publish it. Well, that fell in my lap. That was too easy because all I had to do then was sort of weed through my notebook and pick out the stories that I thought were meaningful and really connected the dots of what I've learned in life. And that's how it came to be. It was pretty effortless.
Yeah. You get very, very personal in this. You go through some of the, probably, I'm going to guess, darkest times in your life.
Definitely.
And really tell it in great detail. How difficult was it to reach back and kind of re-examine these things? I mean, obviously you've been through them. I'm sure it's run through your mind 1,000 times. But obviously you're in a very different place now in life, a very different world. So to have to go back there and what was that experience like? Was it easy to kind of conjure those things back up to your mind? Was it difficult to unearth some of those things that had been put away for a while?
It felt like scratching an itch, these stories that you've integrated into your identity and your history, but you don't really talk about them because it's not the kind of thing that just in typical a conversation, you go into all your history, especially the things that you have some shame about, that you carry, like my history with religion. I didn't talk about that with people because it was wacky as a child. But it really felt, once I started doing the writing, it felt like the best form of therapy I'd ever had because it was a way to make sense of things. And I really did connect the dots and I could see, oh, okay, why did I hook up with a 25-year-old man when I was 15? What the heck was that about? And so once I started writing the stories, it's like I was looking for a father, and I got a husband because that's what church will do to you, because I met him in church and it was God's will that we marry. Yeah. And even though in some ways, these stories could be looked at as embarrassing because it's certainly all the bad judgment of my life is in that book. And but at the same time, the feedback I'm getting from people is I feel normalized because I have all these things I went through and I've never talked about. And I had a history with weird religion too. And so I feel like it's opening doors and building bridges, which is ultimately the goal for everything I write. I want it to do some good in the world. Sure. I want it to bring insight into people's lives.
Stacy?
A question that I had, you being a psychotherapist, you see a lot of people who are dealing with trauma, obviously. Was there ever a time in your career path where you thought, I need to just deal with maybe, marital problems? I don't want to delve into this traumatic area. This is too raw for me. It feels like I can't touch on this without it sparking something within me. Or did you just gravitate toward it because it's something that you knew so well?
I think I always gravitated toward trauma work because I grew up in a family where there was just multi-generational trauma. And I didn't always understand why am I so interested in all this. But it was making sense of my mother, my grandmother, the family histories, the way women were abused. And so it was a natural fit for me. And I was able to connect with traumatized people really well. And marital therapy has always been my least favorite thing to do. But definitely now I just stopped doing it because I see couples that, one of them has personality pathology and it's like, you just need to get away from each other. And people usually come to marriage counseling wanting you to fix it, which is exactly what I used to do. Oh, please fix it. And there is no magic wand for personality disorders. So, I've always tended toward trauma work as something that comes very natural to me, and it feels like at the end of the day I can be proud of the work.
Absolutely. It takes a very strong person to be able to also separate yourself from your own trauma and help somebody heal from theirs too. So, but at the same time, cathartic for you as well.
Yeah. And I really did, as I, grew in my clinical skills, had to really learn to differentiate other people's stories are not my story. I can relate to it. I can have empathy and compassion. I can serve as a guide, but I need to wipe the slate as clean as I can when I leave for the day, when I log off, and seek, as you know, my animals, the things that bring me joy, getting outside in nature and doing that self-care. Because if you can't do that, the work will chew you up.
Yeah. Now, did you ever find yourself lying in bed at night, just ruminating over other people's trauma?
Yeah. A few cases have haunted me. I mentioned one the other day in our conversation with Tony about a child. I used to work a lot with abused kids in the 90s, and a little boy that had a very abusive mother, and he had been taken away and placed with his father. And I was very invested in his care, and of course wrote letters to the court saying the mother is dangerous and should not get him back. And after 5 years, the mother won child custody, just on weekends, but unsupervised visits on the weekends. And the first weekend she had him, she plowed into the back of a semi-truck and killed him. She walked away from the accident. And that one made me sick. And that was really one where I said, I've got to walk away from the child abuse cases. Let the younger people handle that, because I dreamed about him for a long time. And that was just haunting.
Within your story, a lot of it starts in childhood, the root of all evil in a lot of this is religion, it seems. It very much goes back to we're doing these things, we're taking these actions because the man in the sky says that we should do this. And so much of the actions that are taken, so many of the paths that you go down, that your family goes down, that they seem to find to be acceptable things, are based probably not on their best interest or your own best interest. It's based on pleasing something other than yourself. I mean, tell me about when you're indoctrinated into that at such a young age, and this is just normal. And I loved your humor throughout this whole thing. And your tone
you have to
of
laugh.
Communicating it. Yes. At what point did you ever did you have a moment? Was it a moment when you said, this is kind of wacky and this really seems to be the root of all evil of what's going on in my life with the abuse and such? Or was it just kind of like, it's a slow build, but eventually it just is kind of there? Was there that aha moment? Did you ever have it where it was like, wait a second?
Yeah, it was really the faith healing
Yeah.
that did it for me, because the Assembly of God Church, one of these Pentecostal crazy churches, and there are millions of them out there, but there was such an emphasis on, if you have faith and if you follow the Bible, you will be healed. There will be miracles. And certainly when I was 16, my mother was dying of a brain tumor, and I was her primary caregiver during that difficult phase. And there were all the people from the church, the 700 Club phone call I went through. It was like, heal, just tell her, rise up and walk in the name of Jesus and she'll be fine. Well, never worked, okay?
Really?
And so...
Oh my God.
It doesn't.
That's the first time I've ever heard it not working.
Exactly. And so at 16, it became very clear to me that didn't work. Just like the promises of just have faith and you'll have a painless childbirth. That didn't work either. And
Seriously?
And then there was a case where a child was... he died of leukemia, a little boy who was 4 years old, and I was friends with his mother. And they actually told her, don't get the body embalmed, because the Lord is going to raise him up at the funeral and he will rise from the dead. And I was really having doubts about that one. And needless to say, that one didn't happen either. So it was interesting that I was able to have enough logical thinking to look at this and go, okay, something smells fishy here. And there were many other things that smell fishy. But that, I think, was one of the things that I really had to evaluate and question. And then I was really interested in psychology. And when I started in my early 20s, started taking community college psychology classes, I really understood so much. It was just a great fit for me at understanding the map of the mind and these defense mechanisms and the illusions of control and the way that these religious systems induce shame. And so, by 23, 24, I was ready to just flush the whole thing.
Why is it, especially when you look back, having lived so much of this, why is it that people who are in those situations, who are in that sort of indoctrinated cult-like atmosphere where they're being told, don't embalm your son because he's going to rise from the dead, why do people stick with this? Because clearly none of these promises ever take place. Nobody's ever rising from the dead at the funerals. All these, every once in a while, be healed and maybe someone gets better, probably nothing to do with the actual weird guy touching you. But it's like, it's not common though either if someone has a debilitating, illness that is, it's taken them out. It's done, where they're going to come back because of someone saying this. Why do people stick with this? Do you still have family that's still in that sort of a belief system?
Not that I'm aware of. My parents are dead. I have no contact with other relatives other than distant cousins. Some of them probably are still, but they're off in other states and we're not connected.
Yeah. But more to the core of the question, why is it when you look back on that, what keeps people going? Because sometimes you need the receipts. You need to see, okay, well, this is working. I'm going to stick with it. There's never like, oh, it worked.
It's all in your head, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a cult mentality. There's no way to explain it. And again, that tendency for humans to just not be rational because they want to believe in things. They try to convince themselves, and then they'll come up with a rationalization. I remember one woman standing up in church, and she was a young, intelligent gal, seemingly normal, but she said, I need prayer today because I have a terrible headache, but it's not my headache because the Lord doesn't allow me to have headaches. So I know it's a headache that belongs to someone else in the room here. And God is just alerting me that you need prayer. So the convoluted abilities that people have that, okay, I've got the symptom, but it's not mine, it's yours. And it makes my head spin now.
But that's not how any of this works. Your diabetes is not mine. I mean,
We can't
the
share.
basic
We can't
crux
share
of things.
diabetes. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
I can't cure yours. If I've got it, I might be able to work on it.
you
But
need more snakes. You need more snakes to help the healing
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
it's a strange. It to me. I've watched my own mother become part of a religious organization because she wanted membership. She wanted to feel like she belongs
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes.
And I think, we're not going to get political here, but I think a lot of people want to belong somewhere and
Very
be part of
much.
something.
Very
And I
much.
think there's such a loneliness in people's lives that once they find something where they can go to it on a regular basis, you have scheduled meetings, you are welcome in there and you feel like you're part of something. I think people just needing to belong lends
Very
itself to preying upon people.
Very, very much. And some people are so needy and so vulnerable, and these kinds of ministers know how to prey on them and get money out of them.
Yeah. It's the money part that
insidious.
drives me nuts.
Your second marriage, obviously, that was quite a trauma. The way that it ended, with him taking his life. I know you've talked to me about it a little bit off the air when I've shared some of my stuff with you, but to have to kind of go down that and to look back and I'm sure you've done many years of looking back at this and trying to figure out, okay, yeah, there was a sign here. And we miss them when we're in those sort of situations.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone out there today who, as you said, people are going, oh, I feel normal. And there's people, especially when you were in that situation, when I was in a situation with someone that was pretty dark, that ended up being borderline and, attempted to kill. What would you say to someone now who hasn't had the experiences enough to recognize the red flags, but to help them to see it without having to go and live all the way to the depths of where you had to go, where you ended up finding him dead, where he had killed himself in revenge?
Yeah, there's so much to work on with people. And I think the first thing is for them to stop rationalizing mistreatment. If you're dealing with someone who has periodic rage episodes, who's violent, who's threatening, who's emotionally abusive, who's controlling, you need to realize that that is a part of who this person really is. I think the way people rationalize it, well, he's under a lot of work stress right now. Or in my case, well, he had a rough childhood. How do I know that? Because he bragged about it all the time, and used it as an excuse. So the rationalizing, we sabotage ourselves. The other important thing is realize we cannot fix people.
Yeah.
And this was another big error in my thinking when I became a young clinician, and I still had a lot to learn as a young clinician, but I saw him as a damaged man. I was a strong woman with skills. I could handle his temper tantrums. And even though I was not handling it well, I told myself I could handle it well. I minimized the harm that he did. And I kept thinking, I'll get him into therapy. I'll get him into therapy. Well, that one didn't work. We'll try a different therapist, get him in a different therapist. I can't even count how many he went to. You can't change character. You can't change those cluster B traits. And I made excuses. I thought it was bipolar disorder. It wasn't. I thought it was ADHD. It wasn't. It was cluster B personality. And it took me a long time to be able to accept that and understand it. And it wasn't actually until he was trying to become a probation officer and they did objective psych testing on him. And we got back the report, which I read, and it said cluster B traits. And this guy was not suitable for a job as a PO. Yay, they tested him.
Yeah.
But that was really, I think, having that objective evidence, there was no denying it. And at that time, really, it didn't surprise me because I think I had been having this awakening over time and knew I needed to get away from him. But it takes some time when you know you want to get away from somebody to see how to do it. And sometimes that can be a long process before you're emotionally ready to do it and have life lined up, for that. But that was the day that I told him I was completely done. He had had another tantrum the night before. And it no longer scared me as it did in the early phases of the relationship. I was able to put my hand up and say, if you do this, if you threaten me, I will call the police. He believed me. And the next morning, I just said, I am done. And I went out. He was calm. I was calm. And then I came home from work that night and found him hanging in the dining room. And it was a staged suicide. So the whole goal, it was a final act of contempt meant to impose long-lasting emotional pain on me. And I'm a very sensitive person. He knew that, and he knew this would be the absolute cruelest thing he could possibly do. And I think he thought it would kill me. And it almost did for a while. I was very, very broken. And it took several months for me to get the right therapist and friends that were psychologists that took me into their home and nurtured me and helped me back. And I came back better than ever, and life is wonderful now. 20 years later, I'm in a positive relationship, as I say in the book, with a man who never raises his voice. I would not tolerate it now because I've learned to take no shit, but I have learned I can't fix people. And when you are with somebody with personality disorder problems, that's who they are. And they may go to therapy. He went to therapy. He charmed the therapist. He was funny. He was witty. He was manipulative. And he never had the goal of working on his own rage problems and the way that manifested. And so if you don't work on it, you don't talk to the therapist about it, you don't see any progress.
Do you think he ever, I used to work in the vet field. There are certain animals where you'd see them and they had behavioral problems, they had health problems, and you just look at them, and this sounds cruel, but we're never going to be able to fix them. And I heard you say that earlier. Do you think with the right therapist and not charming over the therapist, somebody like that could be fixed?
No, absolutely not. No, we tried meds. We tried every kind of therapist.
Worked.
Absolutely nothing made a dent in it at all. Yeah, this was hardwired. I think he had a father. I never met his father because his father suicided when he was 7 years old. Interestingly, the father was 47, the same age he was when he did it. Father had rage problems. I think it was in the hard wiring. And I don't buy that it was an abusive childhood. He may not have been optimally parented. He was raised in Beverly Hills by dad who was a physician. So he did not come from a deprived background in any way. He went to college, got a degree in psychology. But I think some people just come out of the chute with bad wiring. And he learned to manipulate and got through life, by bamboozling people. And when he was good, he was very good, because we wonder, why do people stay with someone who's abusive? Well, because they're not abusive 100% of the time. There's this tension building phase that builds up. And then very often it's their female partner or their male partner, depending on the situation, who becomes the target for this venting that they do. And then after they vent, they feel better. They're sorry. They want to make amends. You have a honeymoon period, and you can fake yourself if you're in this relationship that, well, the good side of him, that's the real him. And this other side can be fixed. But yeah, after years of working with people with cluster B, you can sometimes teach them to manage themselves, but there's still so much wrong in their core that I don't think therapy can touch it.
To me, it feels like it's like trying to say, teach that person how to see if they're blind. Like, they're not going to. Like, you can describe what seeing is like the best you can, but they're never going to be able to achieve that. They're incapable of it. There's two things in this where there's acceptance that has to take place of you recognizing that you can't fix them, but also getting to a place too of going, nobody can fix them. And so it's not just, okay, it's not just me, we'll get help on the outside. Well, that won't even work either. How long did that take you to really, on a personal level, fully accept that you couldn't fix that person and you can't fix people in general when they're this depth, and that there is no fixing certain people. Was that a long journey to get to that realization and acceptance of that?
It was a long journey, I think, in this case for him, because I really was bonded with him. But we can bond very deeply with people who are not good for us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people who are not kind to us. And I had to really get to a place in my own development. And a lot of this had to do with the early religious training about you don't deserve a good life because you're a terrible sinner. And we feel guilty setting boundaries because we were taught that we're not supposed to, as children. I had to grow in my own evolution to where I really came to believe I don't deserve mistreatment. I do not deserve being scared. I don't deserve being yelled at. And I had to really embody that knowledge and believe it. And that took me about a decade to get there.
Yeah. It's not an overnight thing to kind of get that. And then it's just eventually, it's like mourning, because it's like you're almost like some way mourning over the loss of what you think people can be, where you almost like go through the stages of grief to get to the acceptance over just the idea that this person, I can't fix them, nobody can fix them, and then you just kind of work through it because it's a core thing, especially with someone like yourself who your motor runs on helping people and being there and being able to help fix some people or help them see the path to fix themselves and get to those steps. But sometimes it's just not a reality.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
I really think I came out of grad school very naive and very excited. And at 29, when I finished, I really thought by 35, I'd be out of business because we'd have fixed the whole world by then with all our great therapy techniques. And that's just young and dumb. I didn't have enough experience to get it. And, yes, I think therapy is a wonderful tool for people who are bright, motivated, insightful, want to be more insightful, want to make change and improve their lives. But cluster B people are typically not in that category. And there is no magic wand that changes personality, unfortunately.
No.
What a scary thing to discover about the world,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much more comforting to believe we have control.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think that's what leads to, but wouldn't you agree, like that also then leads to how we get like cults and things like that, because ultimately somebody's the loudest in the group that wants to have control, and they all want to feel safe, and that one person's in control. It doesn't matter if they're going way off the deep end, if that's the only familial place that feels like, okay, I can trust that control, then you're going to go down those roads. It probably, we're talking about earlier, how people have tendencies to be abusive. It's been normalized throughout their childhood, and then they repeat the pattern. Some people have it and they say, no, not going to do that. That was not part of my story. But some people, like, it becomes a virtue to them almost because it's what their parents did. And when you have that sort of a way of thinking, of this is what they did, and well, if I survived it, you can too, when they look at raising their own children. Is that a hard one to break? The parental circle that continues to fester in people's lives with abuse?
Some people, I think, I was not raised in an optimal environment, and I think half of us, even more than half probably, grow up with a very clear value system and awareness. I will raise my kids opposite from how I was raised. I will do everything differently. But some people just are not very insightful, and they just go back on that early programming and they do the exact same things to their kids that were done to them.
Yeah. Stacy?
Yeah. That's how that works. Shavaun, I thank you for sharing your experience. It was hard at first. It was hard to hear. I'm going to be honest about it, but the more, and I had the audiobook, so I got to hear from your voice, your heart speaking to what was happening. What a lovely book. Just
Thank you.
your experience, though traumatic, is insightful. And I found it very helpful, and I think our listeners will as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been getting really good feedback, and people are saying, wow, this is making me look at my relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Everything I
Exactly.
write, I want it to impact the world in some kind of positive way.
Nightbird is the book. This is what it is. It's also on the graphic behind me. Check it out wherever you get books. It is available to you, and the audiobook, which we've been talking about, also lovely. Available on Audible and any place people get audiobooks, I'm guessing, something of that nature.
Yeah, all the different platforms.
I love the audiobook too, because your
Yeah.
read is spectacular on the whole damn thing. You did a great job.
It was
Thank you.
it was wonderful.
It was very, very good. So check it out, Nightbird, Shavaun Scott. And of course, you can see Shavaun here every single week on all the many cases that we talk about on the program. Leave your thoughts in the comments below as well. For Stacy, I'm Tony Brueski. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.